Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching Diplomatic Channel. The United Nations was established in 1945 to provide a forum for countries to discuss and sometimes negotiate, exhausting all avenues before ever choosing the path of offense or worse still, war. Right now, the world is dealing with a major problem that threatens our very existence: terror. The rise of the Islamic State has also resulted in another major crisis, thousands of miles away from where it's happening. And that problem is the massive migration going on in Europe. Hundreds of thousands of people are leaving their homes from mainly Syria and Libya and are heading towards Europe. And for a continent with countries that have strict migration measures, this has been overwhelming. How Europe has decided to deal with the crisis, though, looks more like a drop in the ocean. For the past few weeks, leaders have only been discussing semi-permanent settlement for asylum seekers and making no provisions for the hundreds of thousands who are hoping to make a new home in Europe. Greece's re-elected Prime Minister, Alexis Tsipras, says Europe cannot continue like this. Greece itself is yet to come out of a financial crisis and so may not be able to take in migrants for now. But Mrs. Tsipras told leaders at the UN General Assembly again that Europe cannot continue like this.
The United Nations General Assembly could not have ignored the European migrant crisis. For weeks, hundreds of thousands, an estimated over 300,000 people have made their way into Europe, coming from trouble spots in Africa and the Middle East, hoping to find respite. And though countries like Germany and France opened their borders to the surging numbers, it was clear this was more than they could handle. For other European countries like Hungary, this was not the time to speculate on how much could be absorbed. They just could not be absorbed, period. A quota system proposed by the European Council was rejected by Croatia and other smaller EU countries. It seemed the Greek Prime Minister's message to the UN General Assembly was targeted at them. He criticized the building of barricades and walls to keep the migrants out by force. Greece has been the main entry point for thousands of migrants who arrive on its shores by sea and continue across the Balkans into other richer European countries up north. He praised his country's response to the migrants.
In cooperation with the European Union and other international organizations, we are doing all we can to manage these flows in an effective and humane way. By improving reception facilities and identification procedures, as well as setting up hotspots to facilitate relocation. Nevertheless, for some, the only way to deal with this challenge is to build walls higher, to repel migrants by force, or to ensure that they remain someone else's responsibility as far away as possible. We do not believe that the future of Europe or the future of our world can be built on ever higher walls or children dying and at our doorsteps.
His message was different from that of the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. On Saturday, in a weekly podcast, this time marking 25 years of Germany's unity, Ms. Merkel said Europe needed to contribute to dealing with this global challenge. Though, quote, this means we, of course, need to, above all, protect our external borders across Europe and protect them together so that immigration to Europe is orderly. She, however, challenged that this means Europe take on more responsibility for countries where the causes for people to flee are, or where there are a lot of refugees, such as in Lebanon, Jordan, or Turkey. Many of the migrants have been heading to Germany, which is Europe's largest economy and has relatively liberal asylum laws and a generous system of benefits.
Since leaders agree that one of the means to curb the growing migrant situation in Europe is to deal decisively with the Islamic State militants who have escalated the war in Syria, Russia on Thursday decided to pitch in. Remember last week the United States complained about Russia making inroads to Syria. The country says it is a strong ally to President Bashar al-Assad, but its interest is mainly the Syrian people. Late last week, Russia launched airstrikes into Syria, saying it had hit targets occupied by the Islamic militants. Activists say that there was no evidence that this was happening. This time, however, Russia says its interest is in protecting Russians from the war in Syria. And that's an excuse the United States, again, is not buying.
The Russian government says it will not reduce its airstrikes on Islamic State targets in Syria, but will increase them. An official of the army said they have intelligence that the militants are leaving areas they once controlled. On Saturday, Russian Army General Andrei Katapolov revealed the country's air force has carried out more than 60 fights in Syria in the past 72 hours and significantly reduced the military potential of the militants there, and that the strikes were carried out around the clock along the whole depth of the territory of Syria. He also warned that Russia had warned the United States ahead of launching its airstrikes and recommended that the U.S. stop its own fights in areas where Russia's air force was operating. But as U.S. President Barack Obama has said, he is hopeful that Russia will reverse course regarding Syria and join the U.S. and its allies in pressing for a political transition in Syria. While the U.S. and Russia are aligned in their opposition to the Islamic State militants, Russia does not share the same view that Syrian President Bashar al-Assad must be removed from power. According to the former Secretary of the Russian Security Council, Andrei Kokoshin, Russia's move against the Islamic State is not to satisfy its ambition, but to safeguard its national interest. At the UN General Assembly in New York, Russian President Vladimir Putin reiterated his support for Syria, saying it was an enormous mistake to refuse to cooperate with the Syrian government and its armed forces who are valiantly fighting terrorism face to face. He also put forth Russia's vision on how to solve the Syrian crisis, calling on a broad anti-terrorism coalition that will help fight against Islamic State.
Still ahead on Diplomatic Channel. Nigeria at 55, we try looking from the outside in, being guided by a former representative to Geneva, Ambassador Martin Uhumobi. Please stay with us.